Welcome back to the channel, and in today's tutorial, we're going to have a look at how we can take this beautiful brick building and burn it down, all with the help of some really useful stock elements from Action VFX. This video is sponsored by Action VFX. Action VFX understands the need for reliable, high-quality assets to provide VFX artists and filmmakers with the best compositing and video editing experience. Their library contains over 3,500 elements ranging from explosions, blood, water, fire, smoke, debris, particles, and much more. These elements are properly exposed, so there's no need to worry about dealing with clipping, and are shot at high frame rates. Most elements are also shot in 10-bit and have 2K and 4K versions and are pre-keyed, which is a huge time saver. However, 4K files also come with an unkeyed version in the original format. Action VFX has officially announced their Black Friday sale. Starting November 26th at 8 p.m. Eastern, the entire VFX library will be 55% off for the first 24 hours. After that, the library will be 50% off until December 4th at 11:59 p.m. Eastern. During the Black Friday sale, there will be 2 new VFX collections released. These include Energy Effects and Shattering Glass, and there will also be 2 free products released during the sale as well. Even though this is a sponsored video, I really do think that these are an excellent example of the quality and the variety that Action VFX offers for their stock elements. Especially with these fire elements, I've never seen any other companies that have such specific use cases for having fire, like flames out of a window, flames on walls and on ceilings, especially in one motion, so you can see where the flames actually hit the ceiling and then creep forward towards the camera. And they also have side views of a lot of these as well. Alright, let's get started in After Effects. So for this tutorial, I'm just going to show you how to do one of the windows, and the rest you can choose if you want to do multiple windows or not. This plate also is not provided. This is stock footage that I purchased because I needed a clean 4K plate to work with, and I had a really fast turnaround for this tutorial. You can still use the concepts that we'll go over in this video and apply them to whatever type of plate that you have, as long as they're dealing with windows, because that is basically what this tutorial is. The window fire elements, however, are essential for this tutorial, and you would have to find some equivalent. Either make your own with a simulation software such as Phoenix or Fume Effects, or check out Action VFX. The amount of time that you would spend with a sim is probably not worth the effort, and you get quite a bit of variation and choice with these window elements, so definitely check out this pack. We're also going to use various spark, ember, and some other wall fire elements that are from different packs. You don't need the whole packs to do something like this. You can just pick and choose which ones you like and purchase those separately if you wish to do so. Alright, so let's get started here with the actual tutorial. So I've already got the plate loaded in. If you want to have a look at the composition settings, this is full UHD 4K with 24 FPS. The duration, I'm just going to leave that at 200 frames. That's fine. The very first thing that we have to do though before we can do anything is track our footage. So for that, we're going to use Mocha AE. And I already have several tutorials on the channel about using Mocha AE. So if you would like to have a little bit more in-depth of what we're going over, I would highly recommend referencing those videos. We are using the classic UI instead of the essentials, which is default. All right, so let's grab the X-Spline. And what we're going to do is just take a huge section of this wall. So I'm going to take basically these 4 windows and use them all in one track. Now, I would highly recommend not trying to do the entire wall of a building. The larger your tracking area, the more errors you're more likely to introduce into the track. And also, if the wall was not perfectly flat, then you'll probably notice errors in your track. But here we can see this nice tile and this nice grid that we can use, which will also help track. And it's pretty clear to me that this is flat, and I've already tracked this and I know it works. If you do have some issues with whatever footage you're using, maybe just try using 1 or 2 windows. Now, I do recommend, if you do want flames to start creeping up and reaching another window, to try to do like a set of windows where the flames are very close, because if there's any type of difference between them, then and the flames kind of move differently, then that might be an issue, especially if you have one that's like creeping up from the window and then going into this one. You probably want that all on one track. Okay, so let's go ahead and try to find some points. So I'm going to go right above this seam and then go all the way down to above this window. Right click to close, select all your points, and we're going to pull out the corners to make them sharp. Trying to keep the brick tiles in line. Pull that up a little bit. Pull this one up a little bit too. For the minimum percentage of pixels used, I like to do 80, and auto channel is fine for this, and then we can just do track forwards. All right, now that the track is done, we're going to go and click on this button here to expand the surface. So to see what this is going to do, you click the little S button here. You can see where your corner pins would normally be, but we're going to align our fire elements with our own corner pins. And because we're going to use our own corner pins for that, we do need to make sure that we expand the surface. So doing that will force the corner pins up in these corners. And then we can just click save. Then we can close Mocha. And now what we're going to do is take a copy of this plate. So we're going to just duplicate it. We'll just call this plate reference. Then we're going to pre-compose it and leave all attributes. Then let's go inside here. And the first thing we're going to do, we're going to select the layer, go to layer, guide layer. This will prevent this from rendering twice. All right, so the first fire element that I want to use is going to be this window Firefront 10. Pull this down, drag it over here. Now to align these, what we can do, I'm going to choose this window as the one that I would like to track. I'm going to roughly place this where I want. And then I'm going to grab a power pin. Now the power pin is much more useful in my opinion than the corner pin. You basically have a perspective guide and it's really easy to align this with where it's supposed to go. So we want this to kind of be, we want to see a little bit of frame around it because unless there was like an explosion, most of the frame would still be there, especially if it's metal. Now we have some freedom here to choose if we want like some of the frame maybe broke off or like got blown out as the window was blown out or something. It was like a really powerful explosion. But for the most part, leaving some of that window in is probably a good idea. We can just move this over, pull these in. Also with power pin, which is really nice, is that once you have the perspective right, if you want to squeeze it in, you can just grab the edge and it will move both points together. We want to do something like that. I think that looks pretty good. And then we can squash this down a little bit because this part here is definitely an edge. So we do need to squash that down so it lines up with our window sill. Something like that. Okay, so now that that is placed how we want it, we can go back to our main comp here and then test out the track. So if we go to tracking data, create track data, and then select layer 1, and then click OK. Then go down to export option, corner pin supports motion blur, export to layer 2, the plate building ref, and actually let's go ahead and rename this. Let's call this fire. So export layer to fire, and then apply export. So now let's click play and just see how that looks. And there you can see we have a really nice track. I don't see any sliding, and even as it goes off frame, we're good. Okay, so let's go back into our fire comp, and now the fun part begins. All right, so next what we need to do is start adding some charred edges around the window to make it look like this fire has been burning for quite a few minutes. On Action VFX's website, they have a free section, and in their free section, they have a whole category for burn marks. So I loaded in some here, and I'm gonna take all 4 of these and just load them in underneath the fire. And they come in really, really large, so let's just pull these off to the side here. And then I'm gonna start just with this mask 14 and just try to manipulate the position of this. So I'm gonna click P, then I'm gonna hold down S and then hold down R. Which will add the position, scale, and rotation channels. Scale this down. In fact, we can do something in reverse, something like that. Then I'll go ahead and just flip this channel. Then shift click T, and we're just gonna lower the opacity down. Something around 70% is probably a good place to start. Then we're gonna do the same with these other elements. We're just gonna position these where we want them. Next, what we want to do is just go layer by layer, solo them, and then just get rid of areas that we might not want. Maybe this is a little bit too speckled. So just grab a pen tool, and then we're just going to mask out some of this. Click M for your mask, subtract it, F for feathering, and then we'll just feather this until that hard edge goes away. Something like that. And then we can adjust these later, but especially some of these ones that go really, really low. I don't really want it to go that low. All right, something like that I think looks pretty good. As I said, we can go back and tweak that later. Next, what we need to do is kind of get rid of some of these windows and replace it with a darker room. So I'm gonna solo just the plate, then I'm gonna create a new solid. Let's call this like window glow. Grab a mask, and then it's up to you if you wanna keep some of these windows in. What I want to do in this case is just kind of clear out these top pieces, and then I could even combine some of these. Like if you wanted the explosion to kind of rip apart some of the metal here, I mean, I guess is probably possible. It's probably more sensible with wood. We'll leave some of the frame in, but I want to kind of break this up and make it look a little bit more varied. So we'll make it look a little bit more interesting. All right, so let's turn that layer on. Then we'll make it a 3D layer. and then we'll add a light. All right, so right click in your comp area, new, light. Point light is fine. For the color, what we'll do is something like an orangey color. I think will look pretty good. Intensity, that's fine for now, and then just click OK. So then we have a light over here. So if we move this over, pull this down here, and then if you double click the A key, brings up your material options. Otherwise, you can just click down here and then material options right there. We want to turn off the metalness. So we don't want this to be metal. And then for the specular intensity, we could increase that. And with the shininess, we can increase that too. So basically, we're just using a plane just to give us a little bit of variation of where the light is in the room, because there would actually be a fire in the room. And when you mix that with the fire element here, kind of makes it look a little bit more interesting. It just adds a bit more depth. So maybe the fire is on this side and this side glows a little bit more. Or you could have a fire over here. So maybe on this side of the building, you can see kind of a light emanating there. Actually, I quite like this one. It's a little bit more clear to see, even though that this flame here is slightly larger. I'm going to leave that right there. Now, to get this to flicker, what we could do is drop down this layer to light options, alt click over intensity, and we can just add a quick expression, and then just click the numpad enter key. And what we want to do, if we start moving this around, since we copied the plate inside this composition, what we need to do is select that, go to layer, time, freeze frame. So then we can preview our animation, but the footage will remain still on that frame. Might be a little bit fast there, so maybe we'll just try something like once a second. So it kind of flickers on and off. You could also just drop down 50 to 25, a little bit more subtle. And then you could add as many of these lights as you wanted. So I could duplicate this light and have another one over here. It could be multiple fires in the room, one a little bit higher up. And then on this one, and this one already has the expression, so we can just edit that. So maybe 1.5, and this one can do something like 70. For the color of these lights, I think I'm going to make that just a little bit more orange and slightly less greenish, maybe something like that. And then on the other one, just drop that down a little bit and click OK. All right, so the next thing is let's try to make this flame look a little bit better, because right now we've got some really dark edges and then it kind of looks a little bit greenish. So let's go to that layer. And the first thing that we can do is do remove color matting. So what color matting is that kind of dark edge around it. We can turn that off, and then immediately the flame is going to be, a lot brighter. Then we can grab a curves effect, change the channel to green, pull this out. It's going to make that look a lot more reddish. Then we can add a glow. For this, you'll definitely want to increase that radius quite a lot. You could do something quite extreme like 400, but then we want to take the intensity and crank that way down to something like 0.1. Makes it look a little bit better. Then we can take a duplicate of this layer, and on the layer underneath, we can just call this blur, and then we can remove the glow, and then grab a fast box blur, pull that underneath, and do something like a value of 50. So what that's going to do is it's going to give us some ambient glow around the sides, which is going to look a lot better when it's shining on the brick. We're also going to darken this plate down in a little bit, and I think that will be a little bit more clear at that point too. So we're just going to keep adding more of these elements, following the same type of thing that we did with the window. Now for these side elements, I'm just going to kind of put them as if they're creeping up the wall, so they could hit other windows and maybe catch a fire in a different frame. If you have a different type of shot where you have like an awning or something that could catch on fire, something like that, you could kind of, reposition these where it makes sense to in your scene. So on the example here, I'm just like rotating these around and applying the same treatment, grabbing all the effects, pasting them on there, doing the same thing with the glow as well. So we wanted to make a duplicate and add that blur layer. I'm going to grab another one of these. Now, another thing that's really useful about these elements is that they're, at least with these flames, they're about 20 seconds long. And it's pretty unusual for a visual effects shot to last anywhere near 20 seconds as one continuous shot. So you can start the same element at different times, and it's going to look like a different element. So this means that if you don't want to purchase an entire collection, you can get away with only purchasing a few of these things, and you can get a lot more use out of them. But if you do need the full 20 seconds, then that option is there for you as well. So I wanted to add some extra fire in the center, and if you notice that little lip underneath where the windowsill is, I wanted the fire to kind of like catch on that lip. And this is something that if you don't have an element that actually has some type of obstruction for the fire to hit and then kind of expand along the underside of that, it's very hard to simulate that without going into 3D simulation territory. But the wall and ceilings collection has a lot of those types of files. So as you can see here, the top part of the flame kind of spreads out as it would hit the underneath side of that windowsill, and it looks really, really cool, and I wanted to incorporate that part into this animation. So just some more tweaks with the effects here, and then turning everything back on so we can start to assemble the scene a little bit better. For the main square window fire, I changed the blending mode to screen. And one thing to just make sure that you're keeping track of is anytime you're dealing with fire or energy effects, it's very easy for your values to clip. So you always want to go to that info tab and just kind of hover around some of the pixels and just make sure that your values aren't going above 1. Because if you change it to add, for example, add does allow values to go way above 1. So with add, you get that really harsh light, and it doesn't look very attractive. It's very difficult to adjust in post. You never want to have any values that clip. So to fix any type of clipping here, I'm just lowering some of the curves just as a safeguard. Doing some extra color correction there, pulling out a little bit too much green, I think, so I just added a little bit more green back in. And next we're going to add some sparks. So these are just randomly picked from their spark collection. And they also have an embers collection too, but the sparks work. And you could also do this part completely in After Effects. So I do have a tutorial as part of the Element 3D burning logo, where we go over how to create a particle system that kind of looks like embers. But if you already have a file that looks pretty good to begin with, then you can just use that. So here I'm just adding some color correction, changing some blending modes. I added this as screen, grabbed a CC power pin just to reposition this, grabbing another element here. We're just trying to make the scene just look a little bit more interesting. So all of these little elements really come into play to make that fire look more realistic. Okay, so that's looking pretty good in my opinion. Right, next we need some smoke. Now for the smoke, Action VFX does offer some paid collections for smoke. They also offer some free ones. So for this, we can just simply use some of the free smoke plumes. So we can grab, let's say this one, pull this down. And what we need to do is actually key this out. So the first one we're going to do is just flip these values around just so we're looking more at a traditional alpha channel. There's an effect called shift channels, which essentially allows you to assign the alpha channel from the brightness or the luminance. And when you do that, we get a really good alpha of this. We do have quite a few dark edges. So once again, we can use that remove color matting, grab a power pin. This smoke needs to go really far up. If it only goes like to what you can see here, and then you go back to your main comp, everything will look fine at the beginning, but as soon as you start progressing along through your animation, you'll notice that this kind of clips because you kind of ran out of room essentially. So there is a pretty easy way to fix this. I've also just noticed that I don't need this Mocha AE effect on. That was from when we copied this from earlier. We can just go ahead and delete that. Now, because the corner pin was pushed to the corners, this next step is going to work. If you are using corner pins directly and you are like kind of aligning your comp to one of these windows, for example, as a square, this is not going to work. But in this case, it will. Go back into this composition, do Control K. We can just make this entire comp a perfect square. And then we can pull this smoke up as high as we want. Don't worry too much about it stretching right now, because we can always just pull that back and just make this a much larger set of smoke. But then when we go back to our main comp, it will no longer run out as we look higher up. But you probably want to go all the way to the very end and to see where that is. You can lock your composition here, double click your fire comp, pull over the fire comp, and then you're referencing the last frame here, but inside this comp, we don't really have any animation going on the plate, so we don't really know, and we can just pull that up pretty high, something like that. And we can unlock this comp, close it, and then just go back into working on our smoke. I'm gonna grab a curves, put that underneath our power pin, and just crush all those whites. We get something that's a lot darker. Something more like that, I think, is what we're gonna end up needing. Okay, so once again, I'm just gonna play around with maneuvering some of these smoke layers, getting them in the right place. It's just a really tedious part. So you also want to create a matte and set the track matte of the smoke layer to be alpha, just so we can cut off that hard edge at the bottom. Also, these smoke elements are pretty slow, so we're going to use a time warp effect and increase the speed to 300, so it's going to be 3 times faster than the original. But as you're placing the smoke elements, you need to try not to cover a lot of the fire with the smoke, otherwise the fire will appear really dim and it will look a little bit odd. So one solution to this is having lots of separate smoke layers. So here I'm going to duplicate each smoke layer and its matte, and then on the second one, the smoke is only going to get darker further away from the flames. So it's going to be lower opacity, close to the flames and then a higher opacity further up. Before I get too far into doing color adjustments, I want to darken down the plate and make it look like it was more like dusk, for example, or early morning. So we could grab an adjustment layer, pull this underneath the fire. So this is not a master color correction layer. This would just be an alteration just to the plate. So this would be approved by the client beforehand, so everyone knows that it's going to be darker. Otherwise, this would mess up your traditional color correction because the client wouldn't be able to turn it off. But doing a day to night conversion, you are giving them new plates anyway, so it's fine to do this in most circumstances that I've experienced. And then we'll grab a hue and saturation first, actually, and then just lower this by about 30%. This knocks down some of the color. And then we can just pull down the highlights and then pull down the shadows even more. Grab a blue, kind of infuse just a bit of blue. For the reds, pull out just a little bit of red in the shadows, very slightly, and in the green, very, very slightly. Zoom in for this, but very slightly. And then we can take this layer and then we can adjust how dark we want it to get. So we could do something even just like 50%. Then we can add another adjustment layer. And this could be our, basically just a blue tint. Pull this under here. Once again, hue and saturation. So on this one, we're going to click colorize, and then we're going to just crank up the saturation all the way to the top. I think it's the easiest way to cycle through colors. And we want to do something that's blue. And then the color saturation, we can pull that way down to something maybe like 50%. And then on our blending mode, we can set this to overlay. Kind of darkens down everything again. Click T, and then we can just do something like 40% or something like that. Then we could add a tint effect. So tint just makes everything black and white. And when you do that, you have a little bit more contrast, but then we only want to do that for about 50%. So we're not making everything blue. It's mostly just like the reflected light, but some of the brick kind of maintains a bit more of its original value in this case. Might actually just increase that a little bit. And then this one can be our dusk CC, blue tint CC. And then both of these together, you can kind of play around with the opacities of them to get your desired look. You could also use gradients, especially if you're looking much higher up in the sky. But in this case, we're just looking at the facade of a building, so not a lot of use for a gradient in this case. Okay, so that kind of wraps up what I wanted to show in this tutorial. I know I cut a lot of this out because in the preview I showed, I did some of the other windows. The workflow is the same. So you can do as many different windows as you want. You could have the entire building burning, for example. Also in the main version, I painted out that plane that you can see. If we look further down, got rid of that. Then I went ahead and added just a little bit of heat distortion and some falling embers. But the point of this video is basically just to practice some tracking and to show off these really cool action VFX elements. All right, guys, thank you so much for watching. Hope you learned something. If you did, hit that like button. Really helps out the channel. I also have a Discord server now, so if you have a specific question and you want to have more of a conversation about something, or you want to be able to attach screenshots, that's an ideal way for me to be able to understand what you're talking about, because sometimes it's a little bit vague just on a YouTube comment, but YouTube comments also help out the channel. So thanks again, and I'll see you next time. Peace.